Welcome to the Louie Herron podcast, where I'm going deep into business, sales, leadership, and life. And I mean life, from the boardroom to the bedroom, from business acquisitions to personal addictions, from being saved yet still feeling like a slave, from manning up to mousing out, dealing with divinity to reality. This podcast is dedicated to growth, learning, inspiration, and healing. Jump in, hang on, and hang out. You'll never know which topic I'll tackle next. But one thing's for certain, I'm here to share my experiences, strengths, failures, and hope, all to help us live life at the highest level we can. What's up, guys? Welcome in. Welcome in. So glad you're here with me today. Today we've got a very interesting topic. And I look, I'll give you at the very end. I will promise you next week will be such a business-oriented podcast. I got a hammer of a podcast, and I'll go through that with you at the very end. I got something that's resonated with me that I think is extremely important to those that are listening. You know, men go through a lot of things. We go through so many different things, and quite frankly, there's a lot of times we just get stuck, and to me it begs the question: how do you help a person that is so capable, so talented, from the guilt or the self-programming or the fear or the uncertainty or expectations to unlock to get that person to the next level, right? Getting unstuck, or even what may even say unfucked, like we get there. And before I begin, all my fellow Christian brothers out there, because I do love the Lord. I know sometimes, I say a word or two. They probably don't like the term unfucked, right? But I got a question: is that a verb or is that an adjective, right? In the term, but the dictionary states unfucked is to correct or fix a mistake or a problem. So then I looked up real quick. What does the Bible say in Ephesians 4:29? It says, "Let no corrupt talk come out of your mouth." Seems pretty straightforward. But only such as is good for building up, as it's fit for the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. So when I use the term getting unfucked or getting unstuck, I can assure you my language is not geared towards anyone. In fact, it really resonates with myself, trying to understand the moments of being stuck, those critical moments of really just trying to understand what is going on. What is going? You ever said that to yourself? What the hell is going on? Why am I going through this right now? I don't understand. I can't put wrap my head around it. I mean, we've all had those moments. If you haven't had those moments, I promise you, at some point they're coming. You may know someone who's in the midst of that right now. You may be in the midst of being stuck right now. But my goal today, truthfully, is just to help and encourage anyone who needs to be unstuck. You know, you're just trying to get you unfucked. Let's correct the issue. Let's find the mistake or the problem. Let's identify it. Let's walk through what we need to do. And I'm coming from a position of a little experience, because I've been stuck before. And quite honestly, when I'm stuck, I am fucked, because it takes me totally out of my game. I've got some things, though, that I think will really resonate with you guys today. But I promise you, all of this still relates back to business, leadership, and sales. It's still life lessons. It still comes back to your body, your being in relationship with God, or your higher power. It comes back to your balance with your children, your relationships, and your business, your bank account, your profits. So when we go through this stuff, I want you to really just understand that the position I'm coming from is from one of healing, and still healing through a lot of the things that I put myself through. But when I ask the question, how do you help a person that is so capable, right? Do you know that individual that you see down in the dumps that's stuck, and you're like, dude, I've never seen you like this. Like, literally, what's wrong with you? That is something that is when someone's crippled with guilt, or crippled with fear or uncertainty, it's tough to get out of. Like, a couple examples: somebody loses their job, somebody gets divorced, right? And I got to tell you, I've been divorced twice. I would think personally that's probably the most decimating, devastating feeling a man can have, especially if it wasn't his choice, right? There's addiction, loss of a loved one. Maybe you're just out of alignment. These are all things that kind of get us stuck. But we have to remember that we always do what we value most. So if we always do what we value most, then how do we value behaviors when we're stuck? Because on the surface, most of us wouldn't wouldn't say that or respond like that. Most of us, at least if you're listening to this podcast, you want to grow and expand and get better. But we've all had moments like that. But this requires a legit mental breakthrough. It requires some serious awareness. It requires strengthening of our habits to get unstuck. I think most of our programming is pretty baked by the time we're 7 years old, right? We're cooked. They call that kind of the theta state between birth and 7 years old, where you're largely unconscious, but you're picking up everything, right? You're at that moment you've already made assumptions about your world, your parents. You've developed some stories about who you are, and you're just trying to make sense of your experience. And I think a lot of us, if you're like me, you try to make sense of that, and we go back and try to think about what we did in our childhood, and we talk about that, but we never really take the time to evaluate if what we've experienced is actually, if it's factual, if it's accurate. I think we can all say there are moments that we've experienced, but the stories that we develop, that we carry on into our marriages, we carry on into our business world, if we're not careful, we need to really assess some of those stories. I think we're willing to challenge anything that we hold to be true, except for those things we hold most true. And what I mean by that, more specifically, is you know it's our belief system. If you take, like, I don't know, let's say we rarely challenge the things that we hold most true. If you have, like, a belief system, like, with generalization of, like, global or absolutes, right? So a lot of people may have the viewpoint of all people are like this, or rich people are greedy, or poor people are needy, or nobody ever really forgives anyone, right? Like, these assumptions, these belief systems, this is what forms the worldview that some of us may have. I've been caught in some of those, and it shapes the beliefs and how we actually look at everything, right? And this creates, by having those absolutes or having that mindset, it creates that unconscious story that pops up, and you don't even realize it, and you're in the midst of something and you don't even know how you did it, but you did it again, right? And it creates that loop, right? That karmic cul-de-sac, right? Of repeating and repeating and repeating. We're going to get into that. But people also say things like never, or always, or everyone, or no one, right? When those statements, those generalization statements are being made, we're really explaining our belief system. The reality is when we say, somebody never does this, is that really the truth? Like, truthfully, like, it may seem like that, but to us in that moment, that's what we feel. I think through the process of really getting through being unstuck, we have to have the humility and the willingness to change our mindset and really unlearn what we've learned and kind of relearn. And that's a tough skill. But this is why, if we don't question ourselves or challenge our beliefs, we end up on repeat. It's Groundhog Day, right? Work, relationships, your fitness, your finances. Look, we can go through every one of those, but it's Groundhog Day, right? 90% of our thoughts that we think are the same thoughts we had the day before. 90%, over and over again, creating the same exact patterns. Whether you're stuck at a certain income and you constantly feel like, man, I just can't break that barrier. I keep making 120,000 or 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever that barrier is. Or you want to say something about your wife, right? You want to say something about your wife, and, like, this is never going to change. It's never going to get better. Or the problem is, truthfully, you think it's your boss, you think it's your career, you think it's your finances, or you even think it's your wife, but the reality is it's you. It really is. It's me, right? So the goal, really, when you're in this stuck mode, is first thing, you got to wake up, right? We're asleep. We're asleep. So without awareness, we're not going to even start to figure out what kind of change we can possibly make. And this is causing us to show up in the world a certain kind of way. So I ask you the question: how are you showing up? Do you show up with a frame of power, perspective, purpose, production, profits? Is that your frame? Think about what I just said, right? And so I had to go look up in the dictionary once again. Just give me the word frame again. A frame is a rigid structure that surrounds or encloses something, typically like a door or a window, right? We understand what a frame is, but I've really done some work on myself and understanding that I have to reframe my mental door, my mental windows, because it's the only way. If I have a frame and I enclose the mindset that is needed, I'm allowed to express myself with power and perspective and purpose, production, profits. That's vitally important. And I think what we're discussing is causing the same type of patterns that we experience over and over, with our spouses, our employees, our personal income. And we still think in some kind of way it's the issue. I'll give you an example: alcohol. Okay, my dependency with alcohol was a thinking issue. It wasn't a drinking issue. My pattern was on repeat. Nothing to do with the craving for a drink. It had everything to do with an emotional instability in myself. That was the problem. I was the problem, but I'm also the solution. I've been able to be the solution in that problem. But if you think about, your current experience, do you tell yourself that this will never change, or it is what it is? Right? When we have those kind of mentalities, those kind of philosophies, we've already succumbed and surrendered to the story that it won't get better. But the challenging of that story has to happen in order for a new story to develop. But you got to wake up. I got to wake up. It's a continual thing. I think it's important to realize, especially as men, boys do what they want to do, but men do what they're supposed to do. And what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to be accountable. We're supposed to be responsible. We're supposed to be leaders. We're supposed to, again, I can keep going on and on with words. Is this what the world tells us? Is this your conviction? Is this what you think a man is supposed to be? That's a question you have to ask yourself, right? Some of us grow old, but we don't grow up. We still have childish ways. God, I've had some childish moments. I'm sure probably I'll share them with you because they're quite embarrassing. But I think there's lessons to be learned in some of those moments where you're of age to make proper sound decisions and you mess up, right? So here's my point. I want you to hear me on this. If we can't solve for us, we are constantly at the effects of life. We are the equation. Let me make sure you get that. If we can't solve for us, we are constantly at the effects of life. We have to solve for us. Look, and I can be the first to tell you, I'm a great negotiator with myself, with my rationalizations, my justifications, my right fighting for my bullshit. But I can tell you, I'm proof that you can change. You can get better. Am I perfect? Far from it. Far from it. Still make mistakes. I have no problem telling you I make mistakes. But I do know this: that just like the first episode, life's about expansion. It's not about perfection. I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to dust myself off and move forward. Dust myself off and move forward in the face of the criticism, in the face of the losses, in the face of the failures, in the face of the realities of life that men go through, that happen to be married with children, that run businesses, that lose money, that make money, that invest money, that make poor choices and good choices. This is the stuff that we go through. Expansion, growth. Remember, we talked about before, this the journey. What's the journey, right? We looked at the definition. It's exploring the unknown. It's exploring the unknown. Got to have the awareness. We got to unlearn and relearn, and we got to put in the work. These repeated patterns, to me, how I've kind of coined them in my mind is my repeated patterns are like warning signs, right? Like I'm in the car business, in the car business, lights come on the dash, we got a problem, right? When I keep repeating these patterns, it's my lights keep coming on, right? My destructive behavior, my sabotage, relationships, always, the thought pattern, or saying to myself that I'm always getting taken advantage of, right? Or you're not making enough money, or whatever patterns keep showing up in your life. I don't know what those patterns are. You do, but I know one thing: most men go through very similar situations on a day-to-day basis. We have competitive spirits. We have achieved. We have failed. We have children. We have obstacles. We have concerns. We have things that happen to us on the daily. But these patterns that keep being repeated are warning signs. Some people just say, "Hey, look, man, that's just who I am." I used to say that. Hey, man, like one of the things that I'm not the greatest at. Well, I'll take that back. I've always been I've always said I'm not that great with the details. Not being truthful. I actually, when it's certain things, I'm real detailed, right? It's laziness is what it really is. But a lot of times I'll say something like, well, that's just who I am. But I've started to really take a hard look and realize it's not just who I am. really, that's who I chose to be. But the good news is you can choose to be somebody in any given moment. You can change that quick. In any given moment, you can choose to be somebody different. I mean, at one point, do we say enough to the patterns we experience? That's the question I have. At what point do we say, look, something's got to give? Something has got to give. The research says 85% of the population is not self aware. That seems kind of subjective. What is self aware, right? I mean, in other words, 85% of the people basically feel like the effects of life, that life is happening to them. In other words, they don't have control over it. It's basically what the research said is 85% they're not self-aware and have the belief system that things happen to them. Like they don't have control over it. Again, if we're not solving for ourselves, the equation is not on the outside. The equation is always on the inside. And anytime you get an unintended consequence, let's just say you get an unintended consequence that's good or bad, and it's happening to you unconsciously. Like you're not trying for something to continue, but it does. Like say relationally, like something comes up, boom, all of a sudden you go into your fight or flight, or you go into your response, or you go into avoidance, or you go into confrontation without thinking. You do this, right? And it has an unintended consequence. When it's over, you reflect back and you go, man, maybe I need to apologize. Maybe I need to revisit that. Maybe I need to look at myself a little differently. But why did it happen? It happened because it's unconscious behavior of the patterns. It's almost like, let me say it like this: if we grabbed a calculator and we punched in 5 plus 5, we know the calculator should spit out 10. We already know that. But if I put in 5 plus 5 and the calculator spit out 11, and I would ask you what's wrong, you'd say something's wrong with the calculator. The reality is nothing's wrong with the calculator. Something's wrong with the programming. Right? Whoever programmed it, 5 plus 5 should equal 10. Programming's wrong. And again, it's much like us when our 5 plus 5 should be 10 and it comes out different. Our programming is what the problem is. Let's just say the mindset of wealth, right? Wealth to me is not a possession, it's a mindset, right? It's how you look at the world and your personal relationship to money, right? What did money look like for you when you were a kid? Different results, different if the way you were viewed money as a kid, either your parents had it or they didn't, they spent it or they saved it, but it formulated exactly what your thinking was and thoughts were about money. But if you want to get a different result than what your parents had with money, and a lot of us did, right? So a lot of us that are listening now push forward and didn't have much. Now they do have something, and they're proud of that. Well, what happened? They created a different programming of how they're going to respond to money, right? I like what Byron Katie. Some of you guys, you may want to look this up. Byron Katie, she's got this thing called The Work. I have her app on my phone, but she asked 4 questions that I think are super important whenever we're kind of deliberating on something. The first question is you got to ask yourself the question: is what you're going through true? Is what happened true? The second question is, are you absolutely certain it's true? The third question is, how does it make you feel believing that it's true? And the last question is, how would it be if it wasn't true? So again, it's about reframing. Let me give you an example. Your wife says you're a slob and you think she's a maid because you leave the dishes in the sink. Now she's created a story that you think she's a maid because you left the dishes in the sink. So again, asking the question, is it true? Do you really think he thinks you're a maid? Are you absolutely certain that he views you as his maid? So again, she may be carrying something internally. It's affecting your relationship. You have nothing to think that she's a maid. You're just lazy. You just didn't put him in the dishwasher, or don't want to put him in the dishwasher, or have a different argument to have. But you thinking she's a maid is not the issue. That's not her issue. So again, reframing the story is critical as we're processing through getting unstuck. So how do we get unstuck? Right? Let's land this plane real quick. Okay, we're 19 minutes in. Let's close this thing up, and let me share with you. I think the meat and potatoes of. I think we're clear on being stuck, getting stuck, patterns, unconscious thoughts, what we do. How do we get unstuck? Well, there's a few surrenders we've got to do. The first one is you got to surrender critical thinking and become loyal to the truth. Surrender to critical thinking and loyal to the truth. You're going through something that's got you stuck. You're in the throes of it, right? So the first thing you got to do is critical thinking. Again, I'm coming from my own experience. Things that I've learned to process that I did not used to process, never even put pen to paper, never even took the extra mile to go through it. But you got to start breaking things apart, right? Once you break it apart, then you got to be honest. You got to become loyal to the truth. right? You know, Paul says in the Bible, all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial, right? So think about this for a second. Let me go back to my alcohol scenario. So when I was stuck with alcohol, the first thing I had to do was break down some critical thinking, right? So some of the things that I isolated is what was it doing to my body? What is it doing to my ambition? What was it doing to my time? What was it doing to my relationships with my wife and my kids? What was it doing to me spiritually? What was it doing to me financially? What choices, decisions, and behaviors did I choose to do while under the poison? And did this serve me in any way? See, that's critical thinking. That's breaking down the scenario. You can play that out with any scenario you're going through, but I literally had to break down to get to a point of surrendering to becoming loyal to the truth. You know, again, although free will and free choice was available to me, it may not have been unlawful. Obviously, everything that I was doing was not beneficial, right? Kind of like what Paul said. The next thing I had to do is I had to be really honest. I had to admit that I had a problem, right? I can't fix anything until I acknowledge or understand that, uh-oh, this is not a good thing. What started that? Well, got problems at the house, right? So then my pride gets in the way. Now I ain't got a problem. I ain't got a problem, right? So I had a problem. So it's so funny, like when you take alcohol, there's certain levels of alcoholism, right? I wasn't under a bridge. I wasn't destitute with alcohol. I didn't drink every night with alcohol, quite honestly, but I had a problem. Again, it's subjective. What is having a problem? It's subjective to the person. I can tell you, sitting here today, I had a problem. If alcohol affects your family in any way, shape, or form, you have a problem. You may not want to own it. You may not want to fess up to it. I'm telling you from experience, you got a problem. You got to break that down and become loyal to the truth. I had to hold my new frame and become loyal to this truth and not the critical thinking. Let me just say that again so it's more clear. I had to become loyal to the truth, the new frame that I built that was wrapped around the critical thinking, but I wasn't loyal to the critical thinking. In other words, the thinking isolated what the problems were, but being loyal to the truth and understanding that I had an issue, I had to reframe. I had to reframe that. So, interestingly enough, there are many times I run into scenarios today that cause me that same emotional instability in my gut. It comes up for me. And what I would normally do is when I would get pissed off, aggravated, or whatever, I'd be like, you know what, give me a drink. Just give me a drink. Not anymore. Like I like literally, it took a little work to fight through that. Now it's like I reframed because what's most important to me now is the frame that I built. I built a frame and a mindset around what I know is beneficial to me, my family, those who love me, and anyone that's around me, my well-being, my financial well-being, my ambition, my time, my ability to communicate with you today and young people at an assembly, at a high school, or anything else that God gives me the opportunity to do is affected gravely by breaking my frame. So I hold on to my frame. So that was number one, surrender to critical thinking and become loyal to the truth. Number two, surrender to the duality, polarity. We've talked about polarity, right? There's an up and a down, a left and a right. So what does surrender mean? Well, don't ask yourself, is this the right or wrong thing to do? Question I have to ask myself, and again, it relates to anything that's got you stuck. What is the most beneficial decision that I can make in this moment? Not what's the right decision or the wrong decision. What is the most beneficial? You're at work, you have to terminate somebody, something came up. What's the most benefit? So many times we get caught up, whether it's business, friendships, relationships, maybe even your body, right? Physical, spirituality, whatever it may be. We're asking, that's not wrong. Well, what's right with it? What's right or wrong sometimes is not even the question. The question should really be is what is the most beneficial decision that I can make right now? You got to go back to being loyal to the truth. Got to go back to your new frame. That's the critical piece of surrendering to duality. The third thing is surrender to reality. Remember, we're trying to get unfucked, right? We're trying to break this barrier of what we're experiencing, what we're going through. Got to surrender to the reality, but maintain the optimism. What's reality? Facts versus fiction. What are the facts versus fiction. Let's take an example. You just got fired. You just got fired. What are the facts? Got to replace the income. I'm a little mentally disturbed. I'm pissed off, aggravated, and maybe feel unjustly treated. Facts. You have experience. You have skill. Facts. It's a new start. It's a new beginning. Facts. There's no accidents or coincidence. Everything happens for a reason. Facts. I don't have enough savings in the bank. Fiction. I'm not good. I'm too old to start over again. I'm too young to start over again. Life's not fair. I need to sedate right now. I need to medicate and sedate. I need to escape. I need to change the way I feel. It's fiction. Facts, right? Sometimes something is better right around the corner, right? Go back to surrender, surrender to your beliefs, to your mindset. I had a scenario, unfortunately, a couple scenarios in my 30 years of the car business, and I can beat my chest that I've, bought and sold 3 dealerships and all this kind of stuff. But guess what? I've been fired a couple times in the car business. It's happened. It's okay. But I remember one particular time. I was in Atlanta, and I was at Ed. No. I was at Nally Honda, and great people. Clay Nally, Clay, if you're listening, I love you, bud. Good people. But they wanted to make a change. They wanted to make a change. They were bringing a new general manager in, and he was bringing in his general sales manager. And at the time, I was the general sales manager. So as he came in and brought his people, some people, are terminated. Well, the reality was I had a couple decisions to be faced with. And when I went through that termination, I remember going home thinking, damn, this is but I was in Atlanta, had a lot of contacts. I wasn't overly nervous, but I remember one thing. I remember my faith in God was so strong. I just said, you know what, God, nothing happens without you having control over it. And so instead of me feeling like I was fired, I'm going to start feeling like you just removing me from that situation. You got something better for me. And sure enough, the opportunity that arose right after that turned into my first general manager job. Now, had I and look, I was pretty loyal. I would have stayed with Clay. I'd have stayed with the Nallys. Jim Nally, Clay Nally, great people. I mean, I would have stayed with those guys. They're great operation, great people. But had I not gotten terminated, I would have never had the opportunity to work for the other Honda dealership and eventually became the general manager. So my point is simply this. You got to look at facts versus fiction. You need to surrender to the reality, maintain some optimism. So you need to look at the facts. And the facts are when you're stuck or you're fucked, something's in the midst of that's holding you back. You got to look at the facts versus the fiction, right? You got to surrender to duality. You got to look at the most beneficial decision for you to make. You got to make sure you're doing some critical thinking. Stay loyal to the truth, right? These are some basic tenets you need to just keep to yourself to get through this period. And the last one is surrender to the need to control over others. This is how we stay stuck, man. We stay stuck from distraction. As long as our focus is on the outside, we are not doing the work that we need to do on the inside. Now, I don't come from you as a scholar. I come at you as if I've got it all together. I'm telling you point blank. Unfortunately, I've been stuck a few times and I've been fucked a few times. And through that process, I've handled them poorly. And there's moments where I've done a really good job. And I'm proud of that. But at the same time, there may be something looming around the corner that I may be faced with again. More likely than not, it will happen. But the belief that I can solve for the other person or another human is really what most of our stuckness, our time is spent on. If you look at time, money, energy, 3 different resources, but most people look at money as the most important resource. But if you think of time and energy, I want you to think about something. How much time or energy do you have burned on things or people you can't control? I mean, so much of your time and energy, your bandwidth is burnt. It's eaten up, man. It is eaten up because you're focused on some other person that you can't control, right? If we're looking out there, then we think the solution is out there. Again, the equation is to be solved with ourselves. The solution is not on the outside. These are 3 quick things that I promise it's going to hit home for you. You want to talk about really hurting yourself, staying stuck? Here they go. Staying focused on things you can't control. News, COVID, spouse. The list goes on. Keep staying focused on what you can't control. Stay focused on the things you don't have: money, love, family, career. Stay focused on the past or stay focused on the future. Let me say this to you, my own experience. If you stay focused on what you can't control, you focus on what you don't have, and you stay focused on the past or too much on the future, when this happens, you have no power and you are fucked. And you have no power, no energy, no purpose, no production, no profits, no passion, no ambition. All the fire is gone. All the fire is gone. And the reality is we do this to ourselves. In a moment's notice, we can make the choice, the change, that quick. That quick, we can change the mindset and we can get unstuck. We can get unstuck. We do this to ourselves. We are the problem, but we also are the solution. We got to focus on ourselves, focus on what I do have, and build stories around what I want to have. And we got to focus on the present moment. Sounds simple, but to tighten it up, don't focus on what you can't control. Don't focus on what you don't have. Don't worry about the past. It's already gone. Future will be here soon enough. Plan, have some optimism. Don't dwell on it. It will absolutely rob us. Focus on you. Get better. Do the work. Focus on all the greatness and goodness that God has blessed you with. Man, you got up today. You can see, you can hear, you can walk, you can go to the gym and exercise, hopefully. You've got children, you've got resources in the bank, you run a business, own a business, you got transportation, you go out to eat at some of the finest restaurants, you go enjoy entertainment, whether it's a football game or a concert. We got it pretty damn good. I mean, we got it pretty damn good. All right. Amongst all the things, we still have it good. Focus on the present moment. I'm going to leave you with this and we're out of here, guys. True power lies not in controlling everything, but in mastering the art of movement when we find ourselves stuck. It's in the shift from constraint to action where our greatest strength is realized. The greatest strength is realized from the shift of being constrained, held back in your own prison, in your own mind, to action. Move that shit forward, man. Let's move it. You can do it. Competence breeds confidence. The more work you do on yourself, the more confidence you build. And when we invest in honing in those skills, whether it's being a husband, whether it's being a father, whether it's being a business owner, when we hone in those skills, we don't just build up our abilities, because that happens, but we construct a fortress of self assurance, which we can conquer life's challenges. And that's really what it's all about, guys. When we talk about podcast of business, sales, leadership, life's lessons, overcoming challenges, obstacles. Guys, listen, if you like what you heard today, share it with your brothers, man. Share it with some people that need to get inspired, motivated, encouraged. Let them feel some love, right? Let them feel the power. Let them get some passion. Let somebody else ignite a fire. Let someone else strike the match. All of us, all of us need to not envy one another. We need to push each other to be the best versions of ourselves we can be. And I promise you, next week, I got a powerhouse business podcast. I've got it kind of personal here, the first 3 or 4 podcasts. I'll give you that. But if you want a jam up, jelly tight freaking business podcast, I'm gonna do a podcast next week where if I were to buy a struggling business, in this case, I'm probably gonna use dealership. I'm most familiar, but it's all the same. If I were to buy a struggling business, what would be the 5 top things I would do to turn that business beyond a shadow of a doubt in 45 days or less? I've done it over and over. I'm gonna give it to you. I think it's insightful, and hopefully it'll help you guys rock on with your business and hopefully generate more resources for you and your family as well. Look, thank you for being on the Louie Herron podcast. Look forward to seeing you next week. Let's rock and roll. Have a killer week. Go crush it. Go encourage somebody today. Go look somebody in the face and say, hey, dude, you're awesome. Hey, dude, I love you. Because I'm sure you may not have many people have told you they loved you today. And you have some loved ones. It's kind of sad, but it's probably true. Y'all have a rocking week. See ya.